Appreciate everybody for coming out tonight. This should be a pretty good lecture. We're very excited. Just a little bit about the Greystone Society. Get our plug in is the Greystone Society is doing a few programs and we have the concert and we did the Rebecca Lukens Award and our lecture series is one of our offerings that try and get everybody a little bit more educated about particularly lecture series is about iron and steel. And we're very excited tonight to have Ed Frey, the general manager of ArcelorMittal Coatesville plant, and we're very interested to hear about that. I won't go into a whole lot about your background, about how long you've been here and such that may date you, but Ed's been a good friend of ours for a long time, particularly the safe in the hallway was Ed's baby for a while. He rolled it around from here to there while he's working in the 140 so that the guys from Bethlehem didn't get that. And so that's Ed's safe out there.
This is true. Yeah. This is true.
But we're really thankful for Ed's time tonight, and hopefully everybody enjoys it, learning about ArcelorMittal and steelmaking Coatesville today. So please welcome Ed Frey. Thank you.
Thank you. It's interesting being here. I would have started in this building roughly 32 years ago. I tried to park approximately where I would have parked 32 years ago. But I do have to say, for authenticity, the lines used to go that way, I think, not this way. I do appreciate the opportunity to make this presentation today. It's on behalf of this plant that's been here forever. And I don't need to go into the history. If you want history lessons, Gene or Scott will give them to you. I won't try to take their place. But steelmaking has sustained in this community forever. And while there's been a lot of change, one of the changes is the name there. One of the constants is the people. There's some familiar faces in this room dating back a long time in some cases, and I appreciate you being here. Even some credit union faces who probably I recognize the face but not the name from years ago. It's a small community, and I think it's made this place special as long as it's been here, and it will continue to make this place special. So we're going to walk through this, maybe. Now this is far more sophisticated than I could do myself, so I'll give credit to Rose Terriman and anybody else that touched this presentation. I'm trying to get you from Lukens to ArcelorMittal, and that really is from 98 to 2007. This is a little tough to recognize, but Bethlehem acquired Lukens. That's on your far left, and way out here on the right is PBGC takes pensions. And for somebody with 32 years of service, that's an ouch. Then what we see is ISG came in. They purchased Bethlehem. They purchased a lot of the bankrupt companies. They gave everybody an opportunity to stay in operation or come back to operation in the case of Cleveland LTV. You see Chinese steel market exploding. ISG acquires U.S. Steel. That was Thanksgiving 2003. They essentially swapped assets, and that was the nature of how the business was then. You're swapping assets today. You buy a place like Sparrows Point for $800 million, I believe. So back then you were swapping a rolling mill for a processing line. And of course you can see in 2004 the highest average plate surcharge was $140 a ton. Then Mittal purchased ISG, and Mittal removed surcharges, and plate prices were steady for 6 months. And for those of you who don't know Lakshmi Mittal, he would be amongst the 10 wealthiest men in the world. ArcelorMittal was formed, and that's in 2006. And out here it's official. And of course you'll probably get used to that branding in the upper right-hand corner. So that's just ArcelorMittal. This kind of gives you a reflection on where we are. This is all over the world. The red notations were Mittal plants. The brown circles were Arcelor plants. 60 countries, 310,000 employees. And this one's more to satisfy my curiosity, because it's like I keep hearing, okay, we're in 60 countries. Well, where are they? One of the guys in the plan has one rule: you go to anywhere unless the country ends in "stan." Well, there's only, I think I could only find one up there. And there's probably some other less desirable places to go, but it is a world steelmaking company. 2 years ago, I had the occasion to go to what they call a KMP in Rotterdam, and that was a group of mini mill maintenance personnel. They came from 19 countries. I think it was about 25 different plants, and it was just staggering to sit in a room with people who were in your industry, didn't speak your language, and in some cases had somebody translate what they were saying, but they knew their business and knew their equipment, knew their product as well as you did. So that was one of those wake-up calls where I'm sitting there going, they don't speak English, they don't look like me, but they're every bit as competent as we are, they're every bit as hungry as we are, they want what we have, and they're willing to work hard to get it. And these 60 countries are I'll say, just testimony to that. In the USA, I think it's 14 locations. This Coatesville, of course, is on there in, I don't know, a red, purple color, whatever that may be. Coatesville and Conshohocken and Burns Harbor, they are unique because they have plate facilities. There's steel making in where the stars are, and of course the research center is out there in Indiana, East Chicago. Thank you, Richard. When you narrow it down to plate,
You say question.
Yes, I just wondered, where did Middle start?
I believe, I'm not going to give his history real well. I'll say it was somewhere, I would have said it was out in this area. It was in Indonesia. He went there, his father owned a company, basically said, let me buy the company from you, and off he went. I've had the occasion to be around his son. I haven't had the occasion to be around himself. His son is Penn, Wharton School educated, bright, very, very good. They know their business. They're making a difference in the steel industry in how they're approaching the business. I mean, to some extent, I had the occasion to be in a plant in Florange, France, earlier this year, and basically they were owned by Arcelor, and the prediction was they were going to be shut down, and Mr. Middle's like, no, I don't buy things to shut them down. I buy things to run them. So he is focused on making acquisitions and having them giving him a return on his investment. Oops, backwards too many. Did I answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I think this is where I left. This basically gives you a snapshot of the plate production locations. We're out there in Burns Harbor and Gary, Indiana, in the state of Indiana, and of course Coatesville and Conshohocken. When you're looking at why steelmaking, rolling, and heat treating is in Burns Harbor and Coatesville, rolling and heat treating is in Conshohocken and Gary, which is actually in the U.S. Steel plant, and steelmaking is in Indiana Harbor, Sparrows Point, and Cleveland. Now, why they're all highlighted is we take advantage of that network to supply our product or to supply the plate facilities. So, economies of scale, you have the opportunity, if one area is shut down, you can move steel from one facility to another. It's not universal, but it does allow you flexibility that you were never afforded when you were just Coatesville all by yourself. When you look at 2007, and the historians in the room would say, no, these aren't record years, but recognize, I'll say the record started from about 2003 forward. So the record books were all wiped out, and we started again. Total shipments, 423,000 tons. Roll steel, 585. Don would sit there and go, no, that's wrong. And you're right, Don. But the 90s don't exist in this record keeping. The rolled steel, 485. Heat treated, 364,000. Man hours per ship ton. Shipped on time, 77%. That's not great, and that's certainly one of our challenges. Employment, 703. Dom, you might say that's a record. You'll buy that one, right? And salary at 124. Capital expenditures last year were 13.3 million. Not insignificant. We bought a transformer for the melt shop, bought an armature for the rolling mill, bought a K-mag. That's not exciting stuff, and it's necessary to keep the operations going. In this case, and it's a little busy, and it tries to basically say that, okay, we start with an electric melt shop on the far left, we go to a ladle furnace for metallurgy, tank degasser, vacuum, oxygen decarburization, go to a caster or make ingots, then we go to either Conshohocken to make plate or Coatesville to make plate. In a little more detail, you have a electric arc furnace down here at the bottom. That basically is making this, every pound of steel goes through the electric arc furnace. It then goes to the ladle furnace to refine the steel, to put in the alloy elements, to get the chemistry that you need for the variety of grades that we make. You go to a ladle degasser to lower the hydrogen, and that is all part of making clean steel. And then you either go with that liquid metal to continuous slab caster or bottom poured ingots. With the electric arc furnace, and I think it was revised in 1984, 165 ton, we have a variety of scrap. We are a recycler, so we've been green. We've always been green since we started melting an electric arc furnace. Steel companies will advertise that. Nucor wants to wave the green flag all the time as a huge recycler. Slag additions, and we do have the capability to melt stainless, though we don't melt that much stainless. I think this, I'm not sure if we melted any this year. We did melt in the fourth quarter of last year. This gives you a snapshot of the scrap bay. One of the capital items that was approved, and I'll keep going to Don because he knows this stuff probably better than I do, was a scrap bay crane for about 1.9 million. So, but backing up, we'll see what happens. Yep. Basically, we bring scrap in. It's kind of like going to your kitchen and finding ingredients to make what you're making. You know, if you're going to make soup, you go for certain ingredients. If you're going to make a roast, you go for others. But the variety of scrap that we bring in and the chemistry of the scrap influences the productivity and is part of how we build up the buckets, because it's a 4-bucket drop for the furnace, so that we can maintain productivity, not break electrodes and those sort of little things that get in the road of making steel. We have a ladle furnace. We do deslagging there. We add alloys such as nickel, vanadium, to name two. Very expensive stuff. A truckload of vanadium last year kind of got sidetracked, and you start getting worried when the truck driver doesn't show up, because it's like $1.4 million worth of alloy in the back of a vanadium truck going from Texas to Coatesville. The driver was okay. He checked himself into a hospital with chest pains. You're thinking theft, and he had chest pains. So that wasn't real good, but he was okay and got in there Sunday about 2 a.m. in the morning. Calcium treatment and temperature control, it's all part of making the chemistry, making the properties to make the plate and deliver the customer the product that they require. We do tank degassing, that's for gas removal, argon stirring, calcium treatment, and alloy trim additions. Basically, the aim there is to produce as clean a steel as you can. Okay, I think this is Rich's slide. I should have removed this one.
That's Alex's.
This is Alex's slide, okay. I think the gist of it here is trying to get shape control, trying to get clean steel, and I'm going to go so far, Rich, as to say the bottom right box is more preferred as opposed to the bottom left box.
Worst, better, best.
There you go. And I'm not even a metallurgist, and Rich is.
That's disputed quite often.
When you're looking at the clean steel technology, and again, you're trying to say, okay, well, what does that mean? You go back into this is somewhat of a timeline of what have we made. When you go to the upper left hand, or the second one from the left, nuclear pressure vessels as an application. Every nuclear plant in the country has steel from this site in their somewhere in their containment. And back in the 70s, huge investments in the plant to support that industry, and then something called 3 Mile Island happened. And as we're back into it, you go to the upper right and you see nuclear returns. There's some staggering amount of nuclear reactors that are planned to be put in around the world to supply the energy for the electricity for the demand of the third world countries that are trying to get to, I don't know what's the difference between third world and global leaders, but you never hear about second world countries, but they want power, they want electricity, they want computers, they want TVs, and that whole matrix, here's a little known fact, we won't have enough oil for all that. So you have to find substitutes. And that's where nuclear returns, and frankly, that's one of those items where the plant can make nuclear, everybody, the procedures are all there, and what you have is a very demanding industry, demanding in the sense of a lot of paperwork, a lot of procedures, a lot of documentation, and the expertise to do that is to the retirement side of their careers as opposed to the starting side of their careers. So I'll say this country, if you will have a gap of engineers, of procedural experts that we'll have to put back in place to participate in that world market. And it is a world market. One of our sister plants, I think they're booked out for about 6 years in making product for nuclear plants. Chateauneuf. And again, you have applications there. Some of that hasn't changed. Army material, armor material, and basically, I'll say that whole theme there gets to where's the steel going, what is special about it, and you see on the blue toughness or ballistics, which is armor, or formability, which gets into what are you doing with it? Are you bending it? Are you shaping it? And then you get into process. You can see vacuum degassing back in the 60s and the return of dolomitic ladles. It must be a big item but that gets into the properties. It gets into the ability to deliver the material to the customer with first-time processing rather than processing it over and over and over again to get the properties that you need. Sorry.
I like that slide.
Ingot casting. We do bottom pouring with hot topping, argon shrouding, and the maximum size plate. I actually tried to correct it. I'll say the maximum plate that went out of the plant was in the 112 to 114,000 pound range. Now, of course, that plate, as I remember it, we rolled it on the 2.6, and it basically went into a automobile crushing application somewhere in California. So, the movie where you see the big slab of steel come down and mash a car, that might have been ours. It wasn't a real sexy application. But there are sexy applications to the bigger plates as well. That just happened to be one that stuck in my mind. When you get the bottom pouring, here's again, no credit for making this. We'll give Rose, Alex, whoever really did this. But that gives you an example of you're pouring it out of the ladle, you're going through a center runner, and then you're filling it up from the bottom. And that's so that you have the cleanest steel and from a surface standpoint and an internal standpoint. And when you get to ingots, there aren't that many people that still make ingots. And when we're talking to some of the US, they're like, ingots? Nobody makes ingots. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, but the people that couldn't make good ingots aren't here anymore. The people that could make good ingots, they're still here. So it gets them thinking, and I think that's truly the case, and that's one of the reasons that we have the opportunity to supply steel around the world in some cases. I mean, while it isn't in ingots per se, we have shipped product to Russia, we have shipped product to India, we have shipped product to China, and as we get into the global network of ArcelorMittal, we will do more of that.
It's tough to roll a 20-inch plate after a 9-inch slab.
Very good, Richard. And that's 3 master's degrees. It is providing you that insight. Or have you acquired a 4th? Okay. Continuous casting. Basically the same slab caster, 9x85. We do have the capability to go to 12, although we haven't really done that since about 1982. We have made 76 wide, and the reason we make 76 wide is because that supplies a sister plant, and they can't swallow our 85 wide slabs. It's a tundish metallurgy and batch casting, which means every heat we make is uniquely cast. We stop and start. We're not a we don't, forget what the term is, but some plants will just keep casting. They'll keep melting and keep casting and never stop. This basically says we start at 2400 degrees at the hot rolling, and we get down to 0. We're now over in the rolling mill, and of course you see many examples of that around here. 140-inch mill, hydraulic gauge control was added in the late 80s. Thickness up to 28 inches, we roll clad. We do have an edger mill, and of course the 2.6 mill, which you see the motto out there. Basically started, I think, something like May 22nd, 1918, and we do roll up to 50 tons and 195 wide, and the old girl's still running. She ran yesterday. This is kind of the layout of the 140. The 140 basically, and again, the historians in the room will know better than I, but the 140 was put in the late 50s, started up something like April 1959. It's a Mesta mill, and it was basically to replace the 3-high mill that was down by the 2.6 mill. Never saw the 3-high. They were fun to watch. The 112 was a 3-high. But basically when it was put in as a slabbing mill because you were running the 2.6 mill constantly. As time went on and the 120 shut down and you moved stainless over to the 140, the 140 became okay, we're going to roll plate. Now, of course, in the late 60s, 68, out from, I'll say, here forward was added, along with, I think, 3 soaking pits and a little like crane over here. Guys who worked in the mill then, basically, until I'll say the north end was added, they'd be catching slat plates here. That kind of be the end of the run, put them on a truck and send them to the next location. You're kind of like outside the building. So it's a little better working conditions now. Basically, this runs through what type of slabs do we see there? 9x85. The 10x100 comes out of Sparrows Point. The 12x100 comes out of Sparrows Point. Ingots, we range from a small 54x23 to a large of 110x40. And the plate thickness is, I should have known that a marketing guide did this because it says a 2.6 will make 3/8. No, thank you. The old girl doesn't like to make 3/8 anymore. ½ inch is okay. But basically everything else I'd say, yeah, why you would ever roll 48 wide on the 2.6 is beyond me. Again, a marketing guy must have made up this slide. But for the most part, the capabilities that existed from when they were put in are still there. And that's a tribute in large part to the operators, as much as the equipment and the stoutness of it to last this long. We do have 15 gas-fired soaking pits. Have propane backup, probably haven't used it in about 4 or 5 years, but that's in the event of a natural gas curtailment. We do have the ability to bleed propane in and maintain the operations. Is a little redundant for the 140 and somewhat for the 2.6, so I'm going to move on. For processing of heat treatment, basically you see different temperatures there, normalizing 1600 down, which goes to air cool, quenching and tempering, which is water quench or air or water cooled. Those are ways of getting property into steels for a more, I'll say, exotic use than just a manhole cover. The heat treatment, we do have continuous and batch furnaces. We have temperature and atmosphere control. We do normalizing and neoing and basically a platen quench or a water tank for very large plates. Now this is green anneal is where this picture is taken. That's a car bottom furnace, and basically you put the plate on, you run it in, you do the processing, you run it out, and a crane and a person with hooks will get the steel out of that location. On the other side, we do the continuous furnace. We have 2 continuous furnaces, 200 inch, 200 foot, 145 foot. Temperatures 400 to 1700. The batch car bottom, there's 6. That's green anneal. And you can read the rest of it. Basically, I'd say the important piece is the last one, which we can roll it, we can heat treat it. And that's from a standpoint of thickness and width and length. And weight. Now we're jumping back to conversion services. We do melt stainless, but I'd say more importantly, we didn't do that much last year. I'll say 1,000 tons. But we continue to roll the wide variety of stainless grades. What's listed there is titanium and nickel base alloys. We'll roll less than 100, well, in the neighborhood of 100,000 tons of stainless a year. We don't make it, other people give it to us. Well, give it to us. They supply it to us and pay a fee for the production. That's a very interesting end of the business, because the titanium ends up in nuclear applications, it ends up in military applications, it ends up in the aerospace applications. So it's some very sophisticated end use. Flame cut products, this is the marketing piece. We still do the flame cut products. You see out there in the lobby the fingers for the World Trade Centers. That facility that's out there actually doesn't exist anymore, but we do have shape cutting. We do it up through 30 inches. Actually, there's 3 places that will do that. That's Coatesville, Conchie, and Piedmont. And cut parts may be further processed, flattening, and in some cases heat treatment. Now I'm going to give you a little broader sense of the ArcelorMittal plate in the U.S. We have Burns Harbor. They basically have 2 mills. It's 160 and 110. The 110, until the recent building of mills for IPSCO and Nucor, would have been the most modern mill in the U.S. I think in the early 80s, like 1980, 77. Great mill, 80-inch backups, great mill. They rolled commodity up to 1 inch. Gary, that was the old U.S. Steel facility. That's 160-inch wide, no longer expandable to 210. It's fixed as 160. They make commodity and quench and temper. That mill was started up actually last fall. I think it's slated to make about 300, 400,000 tons this year. And the reason to do that is the demand for plate is just that high. And we had the facility and it's able to run. Conshohocken is I'll say our sister plant, how we're organized. We're Coatesville and Conchie make up Eastern Plate. They do commodity, thin, quench and temper product. And of course Coatesville is heavy, varied chemistry, quench and temperature, and very wide and heavy. When you look at all 6 mills, basically it's one-stop shopping. Now it isn't that simple because we're kind of in about 4 locations, but we do have the ability to supply anybody any plate that they need within the U.S. and that allows you to service customers in a variety of ways. One way is, they want 3 plates from you and you want to give them 10 because you want some more business. So you do have some opportunity to pull business in because of your range of capabilities. Of course, our commercial people are always exploiting that. Anybody from commercial in the room? Production focus. Basically, Coatesville and Conchie, we do clad, flame cut conversion, do a tremendous amount of alloy and quench and temper, clean steels, heavy wide, light thickness, and small special orders. Coatesville is basically a job shop. I was talking to Gary Sarpin this morning, who runs Conshohocken. He had like 3,500 plates that were backed up at one operation and needed to be sheared. In our case, 3,500 plates accounted for every plate that was delinquent, current, and current plus 1. So that would be like, and it's scattered everywhere in the plant. So I don't know what their average gauge is. I'll say 1/2 inch. Our average gauge is, it might be 2 inches these days. So when you're trying to compare the two, when we talk about heavier plate Coatesville versus lighter plate Conchie and small special orders, we really do that. I mean, we're a job shop. We'll do whatever you want. We still do whatever you want, and we still have the wide capabilities to enable us to do that. Burns Harbor, they do controlled roll, precise weight, special surface requirements, very large orders, and heat-treated commodity. What's that mean? It's line pipe. Precise weight plate goes into some, I'll say some special military applications where you're basically building attack boats and you want to have as much weight going to the attack part of the boat and less weight going to the floating and navigating part of the boat. So that's an application that they support. And tank cars would be another big application coming out of Burns Harbor. If you're looking at the three plants, they really complement each other well in the sense that Burns Harbor is more for the commodity end of the business, high volume facility, niche market, if you want to call pipe, for the transmission industry or tank cars commodity. And Coatesville and Conchie are going to make you basically what you need within our range of capabilities. Quality assurance systems. You'll be happy to have a plug for them in here. Right, John?
Absolutely.
Lois? Basically, ISO 9002 since '93 for in Coatesville, Conchie, Sparrows Point, Burns Harbor in '94, QS 9000 since '95, and Sparrows Point since '98. Basically, that's a long list when you get the certifications to do ABS, DOD, TUV, DNV. TUV I think is more German, it's more European, and basically you'll be glad to know that they come and certify the plates that we make in our plant so that the Germans are safe, and then I'll say people, U.S. auditors come and certify the same stuff the same way so that Americans are safe. It's a racket. I apologize to all auditors in the room. Nuclear orders we talked about, and corporate quality and test lab audits. I mean, there's a lot of demands placed on quality assurance. I do make light of it in front of this group, but without it, you would erode the trust of the customers, and you wouldn't be able to be certified for all the wide range of product and processes that you do in the industries that you serve. When you break down where do our plates go, you see service centers. I guess I'll make that analogous to Walmart. They're kind of they stock plate. You call them and you say, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, and they're happy to sell it to you, and they'll sell it for a markup. I'm sure they're not doing it for a community service item. They would say they add a lot of value. Okay, but basically what happened over the years is, I'll say that the big consumers, the big pressure vessel builders, the big places that consume steel in the country, sort of shut down because the business went away, the business went offshore, but yet plate is still needed. So what you have is service centers supplying all the little guys that need the plate. They don't need a plate that's 2 by 96 by 240, and that's all inches. They may need 2 by 48 by 100. Well, they'll cut it out for them and sell it to them, but they'll sell it at a premium. And they have a business and they have a market, and we service that market through those service centers. Machinery is next biggest. Construction, the primary item there is bridge. Within construction, although we do still support a lot of, you'll see skyscraper business within our facility from time to time. There's some skyscraper or hotel out in Las Vegas that'll have our steel in it. It's under construction these days. Oil and gas, we talked about shipbuilding. Exports 5%. Miscellaneous ordnance, I think that's a way of saying military, and rail. Key markets, oil and gas, military, although I just said it's 1%. Bridges and heavy equipment. Bridges, High Steel is actually a very local, most people would recognize that name. They're the largest bridge fabricator in the country. It's helpful that they're that close. We do a lot of business with them. And of course, heavy equipment. New markets, stainless coal cars. Again, you can tell this is a marketing presentation. Nuclear plants, that's more exports. Wind turbines, that's a pretty active business. I think between Coatesville and Conchie, we'll do 30,000 tons of plate that'll go into wind towers this year. The primary customer is Gamesa, and here's where the world gets smaller. Gamesa's coming from Spain. They said, Ed Rendell calls them up and says, hey, I got facilities here. Why don't you put your wind tower business in Pennsylvania? Somehow, I'm sure they just liked his talk shows after the Eagles games. I'm sure there were no financial incentives or anything like that, but they became located in Pennsylvania. We'll sell them about 30,000 tons of steel. It'll go into wind turbines, and that is a booming business. In Europe, that accounts for about 1 million tons of plate a year. Yeah, that's a lot. That's more than Coatesville and Conchie will ship this year. So that, I mean, you know, when you get out of, I'll say this gene pool, when you get out of the United States gene pool and see what the rest of the world's doing and how they're approaching some things, it's interesting because I think they're making for a better environment. I guess I'll wave the green flag. But I think it's also a market that allows plate to participate in, and it's a significant market if you're talking 1 million tons a year.
Are we doing anything for the service, our service?
Basically, all of the MRAP vehicles that are deployed in the war these days has steel in it from our plants. We melt it in Coatesville, they roll in Conshohocken, they heat treat in Conshohocken. And I use there's many different versions of the vehicles. I don't know that I could get there and do it efficiently, but recently we were sent a picture from somebody in sales, and I don't know, Rich, if you saw it or Dennis if you saw it, but the vehicle was totally destroyed, and it's a different it's a different construction. I think it's got a V bottom, so it takes the impact differently. But basically, other than the driver having a couple broken ribs, the vehicle basically looked like a giant piece of earth moving equipment ran over it, and then something came along and kind of ripped it apart a little bit, and everybody walked away. So that's a long answer to yes, we are supporting that cause. Basically, there aren't that many people that can make that steel, and I'll say it's always interesting when the government comes in, like when the Undersecretary of Commerce or Undersecretary of Defense for Industrial Support comes in and wants to understand what do you do, how do you do it, and you know, you kind of lecture him on, you know, if this country needs to be supported by the steel industry, there aren't that many of us left standing anymore. So as you move forward and make decisions, make wise decisions if you ever want to go to war and think you need steel to get there. It's not a political commentary, but it is one of the realities of I'll say the world we're in. Yes, ma'am.
Those pinwheels, are the blades steel?
Yes.
Those steel too?
Yes.
And they're about 200 feet high.
Yeah.
240
My
feet
son-in-law's
high.
making them.
Yeah, somewhere in Pennsylvania or down in Fairless.
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in Pennsylvania or down in Fairless.
In the Midwest somewhere.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I guess I don't know that this will be true, but I think the windmill industry will be somewhat like the bridge fabrication industry. I think it'll be somewhat local. You'll serve local markets, and that's. But the steel producers are going to supply them. Burns Harbor is probably producing plate that goes to where your son is.
Are they being used all over the world or whatever?
Certainly, can't report the world. I'll say in the industrial segment of the world, I'll go to Europe a lot more than in the U.S. We may be doing about 1/10 of what Europe is doing this year. So. And I draw the line there with the industrial portion of the world, as opposed to third world countries or whatever's between the industrial end and the third world countries. But it's a growing market. Shipment by product. This is somewhat Coatesville. Probably the only two things I'd really, well, flame cut products, which kind of gets to the World Trade Center exhibit out there, clad, military alloy, and then everything else is just a variety of industries. Although, why we would have coils designated on there for Coatesville, we don't intentionally make coils. Although, I've seen them made. That's all that I have this evening, I believe. Yes. Any questions? Yes, sir. Yes, Bob.
What's the alternative to steel? I mean, is there another material that's the competitor of steel that you have to?
Ceramics, and other kinds, aluminum, titanium. You know, you're basically, when you get to, I'll say, and I'm giving more our end of the business. The higher up you get on the food chain, the more sophisticated the material gets, so that the substitution gets more, I'll say, competitive. If you're looking for clad applications in scrubber stacks, fiberglass is the substitute. So people will always find a substitute to satisfy their need. Now, what the need might be is they want it lighter weight. What the need might be is they want it cheaper. What the need might be is they want it, and you can't supply it at the demand that they have. But one guy who has been around this industry a long time basically said plate will be about the last industry standing if you're looking at the steel industry as opposed to light flat roll, because think about it, it's going to be a little tough to put on a boat a plate that goes into a bridge. You know, you can move stuff around. I mean, the world's showing us that. But plate has been here for a long time, and it will be here for a long time into the future. Yes, sir.
They had a report on CNN last night. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's very critical of steel coming in here from India and China, low-grade steel, and they cited a couple of government contracts to receive this steel. I forget what the major product was in the story, but the secondary one was this fencing that they're putting up on the Mexican border there. Any comment on that? I mean, on that whole situation, they made it sound like they were really damaging the U.S. steel industry.
Well, as one who stood down there, I forget what the ground was called, but when was that? Whenever President Bush had to sign for steel bill, I forget what year that was. I'm looking at somebody to remember. But basically, the steel industry did need protection for a long period of time. And there are barriers to bringing steel in here from abroad if it's unfair trade. I'll have to leap to the countries that brought the steel in that you're talking about aren't on that list. In other words, they're not subsidizing that country isn't subsidizing their industry so that the steel is coming here at fair value. If it's sub-quality, well, that's the buyer beware. I mean, all of us buy stuff. If it's no good, you send it back. Now, what angle people were taking in the report, everybody's.
But their point was that the steel wasn't being checked, and that the government buyers were buying all this steel and allowing it to come into the country, and they were damaging the U.S. industry in addition to getting poor quality steel for these products.
I'd say certainly that's a valid point within that discussion. When you get to, I would have the opportunity to know individuals, and Rich, you may know him, David Collins, or even Dom, you may remember him. He was at National Steel, who supported the plant, who actually worked for Lukens as a subsidiary, and has supported the rolling mill here in Coatesville. He consults over in China and he was a roll maker. So the rolls for the rolling mill, and basically he's over in China consulting and teaching the foundries how to make rolls. And their end game, where they're trying to get, is to be able to export. And why do they want to export? And he's talking about a very narrow section of an economy. They want to export because the inter-country sales that they make, they're not always guaranteed that they're going to get paid for what they make. but they can't export until they get their quality up. So they're kind of in a, we got to get as good as the rest of the world, or we can't export. And if we can't export, we might not stay in business because the neighbors that we sell to or the provinces that we sell to across China aren't necessarily as trustworthy in making payments. So I think the world wants to be able to be paid for what they do, and the U.S. is the biggest market. I mean, I'm not going to stand up here as an economist, but we got the biggest market, so they want to come here. But again, I'll say buyer beware. And to some extent, I had friends in a lot of plants that were shut down. Gulf States doesn't exist anymore. Geneva doesn't exist anymore. The Fontana Mill doesn't exist anymore. The Gary Mill doesn't exist anymore to the U.S. steel guys. And I had friends that worked at those plants, and they don't have a job anymore now. I'll also say those plants weren't very competitive in the world, U.S. Steel aside. I mean, Geneva, Gulf States, those weren't very competitive plants. So this is a world economy. I mean, you got to be as good as anybody anywhere in the world. And if you are, you'll be there. You'll last. Yes, Don?
I got an easy one for you. The 110 mill, are they running that very much at all out there, Burns Harbor?
They run it about...
They ran it for 2 weeks and shut it down for several years. Well, not.
It's tough. You know, you would remember the plate market is 5.5 million tons with about 800,000 tons of imports. Right now it's about 7.5 million tons with almost no imports. Now, is that the infrastructure of the U.S. that's just needing to be replaced? That's a piece of it. Is it the building industry? That's a piece of it.
We're exporting.
We are exporting. You know, last month, I'll say, out of Coatesville, I think, Coatesville, we're 4% was exported. It's not insignificant. You know, it's the value of the dollar. You know, what's interesting with the value of the dollar, and I'm coming from a manufacturing perspective, it wasn't that long ago that I was out in the mill talking to some guys from General Electric, and they make large motors. You know, 5,000 horsepower motor, 3,000 horsepower motor. And he was marveling that he's quoting work over in Europe. It's been years since they had that opportunity. So, you know, the world will balance itself out if you produce quality, if you produce it reliably, if you produce it, you know, get good service, get good delivery. I think you'll last. General Electric, in this case, with their motors, they have an opportunity to have business that they never did before. So, yes, sir.
If you were to replace a mill today, say the 2.6, do you have any idea how much that would cost? I know you're giving capital outlays, but any idea what it would cost to build a new mill today? Say a large one.
200 million?
See what you have about that?
Correct me, Richard? 200 million?
Easy.
It's years ago, the housing for the 140 was basically, it was something like $1 per pound of separating force. So if you want to be able to build a 16 million pound separating force mill, you're going to cost $16 million. Now that was 15 years ago. Multiply it times 2. I mean, a table roll costs $60,000. I think I'm off the scale. I mean, it may be 300 million. You know, you've been in the mill. Those of you who remember the mill, a table roll, all it does is it's like part of the conveyor belt of moving plates up and down the line. Just a table roll is $60,000. Or no, I'm sorry, I'll say it correct. It's $27,000. 3 years ago, it was $9,000.
And how many are there in the 140?
I don't know.
60, 80, 100?
300. I don't know. It's lots. You know, the rolls that are over in that little mill, they're basically $250,000 a piece, and you buy 18 of them at a shop. The armature for the vertical mill was, I think, 1.2 million. It just, I think I'm lowballing you at 300 million.
Are there domestic producers of mill rolls and mills?
Mm-hmm.
Rolls, not housings.
Rolls,
Cast still.
cast. continuously cast. We happen to buy them from Johann Buch, who's a third-generation roll builder from Germany. It's always nice to meet the, that kind of heritage. We buy them from Buch, Maréchal Catin, which is a Belgium roll. There are two primary suppliers. We do chrome rolls these days, not nodular iron. So, yes, sir. Gene, sorry.
You mentioned the former Gary mill that was part of U.S. Steel. Did I understand you said it was 160 that it had been?
They had the ability, if you can imagine an accordion, they had the ability to pull it out to 210.
Because I remember, we used to advertise forever we had the world's largest plate mill. Then we heard that U.S. Steel built one that was 210.
Correct, in
And it was at that point we
1962.
took the sign down that we were the world's largest plate mill. So that was the mill in question then?
That was the mill in question, and I used to always give them a lot of constructive feedback on their need to paint their water tower there that advertised what you're talking about, because once they gave up the ability to expand it, we got back into being the largest U.S. plate mill.
Right.
You go abroad, we're
So
off
it
the
was
scale.
mill
They
was
certainly
the mill.
had the ability to get to 210.
Thank you.
Where is State's U.S. Steel now? Is that in water?
No, they're still a very vibrant part of the steel industry.
Good, that's where my pension goes.
Pension, what's that?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious of a little personal history. You said, I think initially that you've been 32 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you always been here?
Yes,
And
yes,
how
ma'am.
did your job change with the changes in ownership?
You really had to let it go. There were a lot, a lot of issues. I'd say it may have been something like May 27th or 29th, 1998, when we weren't Lukens anymore. And I forgive for not. I had the opportunity to go down to that board meeting where Lukens essentially ceased to be Lukens anymore. That was the toughest. And that was the toughest. After that, it got a lot easier to move from company to company. I had an odd moment not that long last week where employee in their 60s basically looked at me and said, Lukens was a great company and I love that company, but ArcelorMittal's a pretty good company. I think it might be a better company. And I'm like, whoa, because I've known this guy 20 plus years. And I'll say, for somebody like that to make a reflection like that is, I think, a reflection of how much we've had to grow as we've had to leave some things go. But the world's a lot faster, the change is a lot faster, but you adapt and you grow and you just keep thriving, or it eats you alive.
I have one other quick question.
Yes.
Is there any chance that at any time they're going to start again doing what I consider to be the best factory tour ever?
Well, where's Blinky these days? Actually, I forget who. Last weekend we were cleaning up the Brandywine. That was quite a treat. I'm surprised Richard wasn't there. But we were with Brandywine Valley Associates and we were cleaning up the Brandywine, and I forget who brought that up, but they were somewhere in a retiree in their 80s who worked in the open hearth. Was making comment to that regard. I guess I'll say I'm not sure, but I thought it was a good idea last Saturday. No, I did. Those were. It was nice to do that, and what we basically used was retirees. I think we did it on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, probably Wednesdays, because the mill's down on Tuesdays and the mount shop's down on Thursdays. I guess the one thing that I'll ponder out loud is we put some different practices in at the melt shop, and I'm not sure how much I'd have to we had a unfortunate event last year where we had a fatality in the melt shop. We've had some changes following that. I'm not sure how visitor appropriate we are right now. But that doesn't take us away from the rest of the plan. But I don't know that we'll do it. I don't know that we'll do it, but I certainly thought it was a good idea, and if some people want to grab that one, we may start doing it again. Bob.
Just all the spin-off industries that the mill supports, just get a picture of that. You know, the shops and the, you know, what all the vendors and things that you...
Well, the old ratio is something like 7 to 1, right? For every employee here, you've got 7 out there.
Wow.
Local guys, city construction, I mean, that I could rattle off. City construction, hats, palettes. Then lots of little shops around. Yeah, North American Machine Shop that's not that far away. We do a lot of work at a lot of little shops. What's that?
Machining and millworking and that kind of stuff.
It's that. It's bringing in services like J.C. Hale. I think they're out of Lancaster, is in doing some work right now. Reading Crane comes in. Of course, that's populated by some ex-Lukens people. Don Markford, you know, he just keeps coming around. But it even Coatesville Scrap and Iron Net. They supply, I think, something like 21% of our non-alloy scrap last year. So, and Heckett Multi-Serve is essentially, they're a support goods and services to the melt shop, but they're a local employer, and they're not a subsidiary of ours. So, yeah, it's kind of funny. It still is connected to a lot of people in the community. Not the same old names, but in some cases it is the same old names. Like City Construction used to be Coatesville Construction, and Palettes, I think, I don't know how long they've been supporting us, but they've been around forever. Yes, sir.
Globally, where does ArcelorMittal rank in terms of overall steel production, and who are some of your global competitors?
Well, they would be number one in steel. The steel industry hasn't consolidated. Mr. Middle would have had the vision that, you know, consolidate the industries. I think you have to have about 3 more Mr. Middles to where you really have consolidated, and now you've somewhat stabilized, I'll say, the price and the supply equation. I don't know that can happen because of China, because that alone is a significant portion of the steel industry, and not one that you can go in there and buy. You can go and have joint ventures, but not buy. In the world, well, I'm more plate oriented than I am anything else. So I'll say two premier competitor suppliers, Dilligan, which is in the Saarbrücken region of Germany. That facility, I'd take that facility any day of the week. I never saw a U.S. facility that I'd take, but I'd take that one. Damn Germans, they do know how to do things. And then somewhere behind there is the mill that they have. Well, of course, they didn't have a mill after the war, and it's interesting walking through their plant because you can see the holes in the wall, or the cutouts in the stone walls from the battles that were fought around there. But of course, because of the Marshall Plan, we gave them a mill from the United States. They took that mill, turned and made money, and then bought another mill, and they're a great plate mill. There's certainly China Steel on the island of Taiwan. And then there's the Japanese mills, and China really has yet to really show its face in this part of the world, and they will. You know, once they quit consuming internally. Is it 10 years from now, 20 years from now? They will. But most of the industry is local, you know, so it starts locally, and then depending upon where you are in the food chain, you go out. You know, I'll look at our sister plants in Europe, Charleroi in Belgium, Le Creusot in France, Châteauneuf in France. They basically are 3 different plants, 3 different plate producers. They tend to stay locally. They import a little to the U.S. Let's call it, I don't know, 100,000 tons. I mean, you were hanging out with Richard recently. It's not a lot against 7.5 million ton capacity, but it's the highest quality, the highest end use demand on the product. So those are, you know, Mr. Mittal, 20 million tons.
Mittal is 120 million worldwide. The next closest is 30. That gives you an idea of how much bigger he is than anyone else.
Yeah, and that may be Nippon or
the combinations of JFE,
POSCO or
JFE, which was Nippon Kawasaki, and then you have Korea is
right.
about 25 million. ThyssenKrupp, Chorus.
Yeah, but I mean it drops off a lot.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, with a lot of industries, you got to be like 3 suppliers at 60% or 70% to really have control of the market. In the U.S., I'd say IPSCO and Nucor are the main competitors. But one of the byproducts of, I'll say, all this consolidation is you don't have somebody who's going to lower their price just to keep paying the bills. So there's better discipline in the market. But again, you're looking at most of it stays local, regardless of where you are. Yes, ma'am.
One or two more questions left there.
This Mittal company, are they employing a lot of Coatesvillians? This poor old Coatesville?
I couldn't give you the roster. I'd say it's in the same percentage it always did, but there's only 800 and some employees. You know, if it used to be 5,000 employees and 20% of them came out of Coatesville, well, 20% of 800 isn't as much as 20% of 5,000. So there's still, I guess I'll also turn it around and say, Coatesville isn't a place that a lot of people are coming to.
No, there's a lot of people that need jobs around here.
We take applications and we interview and people get jobs, or okay. It doesn't matter where you live. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Any symbolism to the logo?
Any guesses in the room? Any guesses, Richard? Lois?
No comment.
Dennis? Boldness, Franny? Any guesses? Let me see, others?
Twisting hot steel.
About the only connection I had was somebody said, well, this is connecting the dots of where we are around the world. And I went, that's not bad. But you'll be happy to know. And I don't know that this is the true color, but that is a unique registered color. So don't be pirating that. Don't think you can go and get that color anywhere. It's ours. Okay. Anything else? No.
We really want to thank you again for coming and sharing, the ArcelorMittal story. And I think one of the things that I just relate with is Rebecca recognized early on that the plant here had potential far beyond the immediate locality. She had selling agents in Boston and New Orleans and across the United States, and thinking about the markets, and obviously that has just expanded to a worldwide market, and to position yourself in that, and to have that asset here in Chester County and Coatesville to supply the world's needs is a tremendous opportunity. But again, we really want to thank Ed for coming today and giving the insight of ArcelorMittal. One of the things we obviously would like to talk more about is, as you get the plant tours up and running, the idea for
and Scott will be a tour guide when we get the tours up and I
read my manual. We have the manual. I read it, but one of the things that I think can't be stressed enough. I made this analogy the other night at the Lukens Veterans Guild. Is basically when you go, you could come here and you look at steel, but it is a very dangerous process. You're controlling tremendous amounts of energy, and it's you have to be very careful in doing that. People get hurt, and obviously that's not the bright side of it, but it's a very dangerous process. So getting people up and close to that, it needs to be sensitive. And obviously that's what we also try and do, is to explain that a little bit more and to get people to understand the steelmaking process. It's a complex process to break it down. But again, want to thank Ed for coming tonight and sharing with you that story.
And certainly one of my favorite moments would have been, I think this gentleman to my left's mother, Blinky came into the office. They were taking a plant tour. It was like Lukens is no longer and Bethlehem's about to be. And Blinky comes in and goes, she wants to throw the burlap bags at the 2.6 mill. Can she do it? And I'm looking at him like, and I'm having this flash. Okay, she's going to get exposed to the heat. She's going to get faint. She's going to fall down. I'm going to have a family member lying there and being exposed to heat. It's like, okay, no, Blinky, we're not doing this. You might ask her if I have my facts right.
Can I throw a burlap bag on? Shoot it up into the wrap.
You'll pass a lot of tests to get there. That's more sophisticated than you think.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thanks again for coming tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.